together. How did you guys go from just like 2 kids when we met you to 7 kids?
3,000 kids.
Yeah. What was that transition like for you guys?
You go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think we told you guys at breakfast or something that honestly, Carly's family had a big part in that, is seeing a large family as they've, with adult children, and sort of watching the just how much life and vibrancy is in a family like that. And there's another couple that we were in a small group with, back when we only had two kids, and we saw the fruit of raising, a bunch of children, what it looked like when they were grown up. And it's like, well, if we want that, we're going to have to do the work now and raise the kids. We have to actually have the children, because neither of us really come from that. I mean, you have 2 siblings, I have none. So it was a real, just a real beautiful thing that we saw as a blessing. That I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but we saw it that way and said, okay, Lord, we want that.
Yeah,
give us that.
And I think we recognized that we couldn't necessarily have that for ourselves. We can't go back in time and her have more siblings or me have more. And we love our families.
Yeah.
But what we saw was the ability to give that to our children, that our children would have, brothers and sisters and cousins and nieces and nephews. They would have that larger family and when my family gets together, it's a full house.
Yeah.
But when your family gets together, it's just us and your parents.
Yeah.
But
it's a full house now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But the ability to give that to our children, to have a Christmas gathering that's just our family getting back together and have 20, 30 people in the house.
Yeah.
That was kind of our motivation.
It's kind of like an inheritance of some kind, like in real time, because instead of having to wait until you guys are gone, like they're getting to experience that blessing right away.
Absolutely.
Or at least down the road. So I guess, because I think it was at that time you'd won a Grammy 2016-ish.
Yeah, that's right.
And I had to look it up because I knew I couldn't remember exactly. But I remember it happened while we were there.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, man, like this whole road you're on is just wild. Like coming from Colorado, not knowing anything about the music world, it was just wild to see like the busyness of your life and kind of always being on the road. And I guess, was that like a hard transition to make? Was it like a very intentional, or it just kind of happened naturally when you guys are going from that life to making more babies?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll jump in first and let you give details, but it really happened twice in her life because we didn't know each other when she signed a record contract. We hadn't met yet. She signed a record contract, had her first album out, and had her first single, was already seeing good success before we even met. So we meet right around the time her second single is taking off and exploding. And now all of a sudden she's a snowball going down the hill and you can't stop her.
Sure.
Right around the time that we meet. And we meet and are engaged and married within, not from the time we met. We started dating, engaged and married in like 3 or 4 months. It was a very quick engagement process. And then we got pregnant 4 or 5 months into our marriage. So things changed for her at the same time that her career was doing this and the demand for her name was doing that. Our family was growing. I mean, just going from single to married.
Sure. That's a lot by itself.
By itself. And then throw a child in there. And then 2 years later, another child. So she's still making music. She's still touring during all that time. But then we kind of made an intentional effort to slow down without, I think before we'd even really talked about growing our family too much, we started slowing down, at least kind of looking into what the future would hold. And then as we had our third, and then was that same year, or it was right before the third was born, you were pregnant when you won your Grammy. And that was kind of an extra, when I say that happened a second time, that was a real extra boost. That whole album, that song, that Grammy really kind of elevated a whole extra level. Right as we went 2 children, and that was our third was born right after that. And then we went third to fourth to fifth to sixth to seventh, all
bam,
2
bam,
years
bam.
apart. Boom, bang, 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 boom. So it was really quick.
But yes, it was intentional. I mean, really for me, the moment I got married, I was like, oh, okay, I'm ready to just do this. I don't need to keep having, this like life outside of, but the Lord, saw fit for us to continue on that path and obviously used it and all of that. And we're not done making music, but around the time that our third was coming into this world, I think we were even just pregnant, talking about, we don't want to take, a month off for this baby and then get right back to 100 dates a year. Like, we want to actually have time as a family and figure this out. And I remember I mean, literally, when you're in that world, people say, "Oh, I'm so excited! I get a big break coming up," and you're like, "Oh, what? How long are you going to be off the road?" "Oh man, like 12 days."
Oh
And
my
you're like,
gosh.
That's not a that.
Yeah,
No.
It's
You
not
don't
a break.
understand.
Yeah.
And we were like, we're going to take like 6 months off when we have this baby.
Mm-hmm.
And people in the industry looking at us like, oh,
That's
is
so
everything
sad.
okay?
Is everything okay?
Yeah,
Right, yeah,
you
you're
can't
done,
get a
aren't you?
tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we didn't know, again, like you said, that was sort of the height of everything career wise, but we felt like we were supposed to just step back, and we didn't know how that was going to work financially, because touring is really your main source of income, especially in Christian music. But we just kind of followed the Lord's leading, and he's just been faithful. And that was 4 babies ago. And, however many years we've toured less than we ever have, but God has still just sustained us and given us other opportunities to, use that platform that doesn't require us to be gone all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what we're excited to see how that continues to grow.
How was it like having the craziness of touring? How does that compare to like the craziness of being parents of 7 kids?
Different crazy, I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, you're parenting in front of an audience. That's like the first thing, nonstop.
Yeah.
To some extent, we even lost some of our filters because people were around us all the time, but we had to be ourselves. We had to be parents.
Right.
And so for the
Did I have a
downside of
filter?
that,
Did I ever have one?
if you did, it went away completely. So that's something that we're having to even relearn how to not say everything that's on our mind all the time, because we learned there was no private time. So if we're going to speak our mind, let's just speak it wherever we are. Now we're having to, reel that back in a little bit. But the biggest thing is your parenting is on display. You're in front of people all the time parenting. But there's also, there's tons of benefits. There's educational, like we're going places that, these kids are getting to see things and sights and all across the country. And so a lot of great benefits from that standpoint. But nothing that we at this point would trade, for we wouldn't leave our kids at home to go have those experiences ourselves. Now we if we're going to have them, we wouldn't want them to have them with our children. So
especially as a lifestyle, like when we, you guys were living in Nashville, like being on the road, we had 2 of everything, for our kids. Like we bought a scooter for home, we bought one for the arena, so a pack on the
Different
bus
purposes,
because there's nothing else to do. And I joke all the time, especially now that I have so many kids and cook in such large quantities. But for so many years, we were home so few days. Like I'd buy a loaf of bread and it would last for weeks, you know, because you've got 2 kids and you're just never there.
Right.
And once we started being home more, I'm like, goodness gracious, I have to shop all the time. I didn't know how to buy groceries.
Yeah.
And then our family kept growing.
we had to relearn how to
A
buy
lot of
groceries
weird things. But I would say the road for a single person is like fun. Like it's really, you can just sort of have a great
do
time.
what you want and go see things and have new experiences. Yeah.
But, and it can work obviously for more than that. But the couple of times since having kids that I have been on the road, even just for a weekend, like not pregnant, not nursing a baby, keeping me up in the night, just going to just do the show and come home. I'm like, oh, I see why people do this.
Yeah,
because it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah. Mix it up a little bit.
It's just always for me been trying to do both at the same time. And it's really hard for me. I know some people probably do it better, but trying to take the mom hat off and put on the like artist hat and then go back and forth and feeling like you're not doing any of it really well is kind of my reality. But the Lord gives grace.
Well, I mean, from the moms that I talk to that work, and granted, it's not quite the same, but it's still like the mom hat versus the working hat or whatever, the professional hat. I feel like much like health, we have kind of this idea that maybe it's a light switch, like on or off, or maybe it's the idea I like to propose is maybe it's a dimmer switch of like progressively brightening or dimming down a little bit. But like who you are in your roles don't change.
Right.
And I think that seems like that can be hard for a lot of people, but I think especially moms, because it's just this different, I don't know. I think we're very focused and driven, and like we have kind of like society, from a society perspective, we have this idea like, well, we provide financially and then we're kind of done. And then women are like, well, I have to maybe help provide financially and raise my children and cook and whatever else. And so has that gotten easier, better to kind of put that hat on or dim the switch down or whatever you need to do?
I mean, I can speak to that, and then if you have anything too. But for me, like leaning into traditional roles has been the most freeing thing ever, because our life has never looked super traditional.
Sure.
And I never really knew where I fit in that. Just sort of internally, it's not like I had all this struggle of who am I, existential, but it is hard to know like where am I most needed? What am I most supposed to do? And so these last few years, especially, since we kind of moved and we're, a little outside of Nashville and just sort of not in the circus tent as much, it's easier for me to lean into those roles, and it feels very natural and kind of like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do.
Sure.
Now, did God also obviously give us this platform, and he's given gifts and all those things, and do I think there's still ways to use those? Yes, and we're making an album right now, and I'm excited about it.
That's
but
awesome.
there is something so beautiful about understanding that we're not the same and we're not interchangeable, and I know that will probably make some people mad, but God made men and women differently and with different strengths and different purposes and different instincts, and just leaning into that has actually been freeing for me.
How did the industry, like friends and people that were in that maybe don't agree with that, have you talked to them much about that kind of idea of traditional roles and kind of had those conversations?
I feel like most of the conversations I've had, people are like, tell me more. You know what I mean?
They're intrigued by it.
They may put on a face of acting like, oh, but they're like, wait, you can just be a mom. Like, you know what I mean? There's just there's this sort of desire and interest in, how are you guys? I mean, we've gotten that so many times. How are you guys? How are you doing it?
How are you surviving right now? And I don't have an answer. I mean, God has just provided.
That's the best answer.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, the interesting thing is looking back, because we had these inklings of we want to work towards this one. And I don't know that we ever had an inkling that we'd work towards 5 concerts a year. I mean, that's what it feels like, right? It used to be, 100, 115 was
wild. That
was kind of a heavy year. 100 was normal. 75 was like, wow, you're really slowing down. 50 is like, you can't survive.
You're not.
Sure.
That's not possible.
Yeah.
Like 50 is like, you're basically retired.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then we got down to 15, 20. And then just depending on the year, there's some years where we're literally a half dozen or less. And a lot of that has to do with just, we're picking and choosing, or ones that make sense, or they're ministry partners. And it's just God. He organized and orchestrated everything without us even realizing. We had an inkling of what we wanted, and then one day it was just there.
Yeah.
I remember sitting down with our booking agent, who is because I am her manager, so management would be right there with them.
Sure.
But booking agents would be, of all the people who make money off her touring. They don't make money off her album sales. They like, when she goes and plays a concert, they get their commission, and we love them. So we will gladly write those commission checks. We love them, but that's where they make their money.
Sure.
And they could kind of see where she was at in her life and what was going on. And they looked around, and we were at my office at the time, and I had all of our plaques of all of her achievements on the walls. And they basically said, look around there. Like he said, think about when you were first getting started. What did you want to get to that's not already hanging on this wall? Like, you've got number ones, you've got gold, you've got like, what is it that you wanted? And it was like, he said, you can't keep chasing those stats or those plaques or those awards or even the approval of this radio station or streaming entity or whoever it is, or fan base. Like, you have to be making music or ministry that honors God. And so they suggested that I don't know that they anticipated it being 5 years or whatever it's been, but they basically said, you need to take time off, all the time that you need. Just go dark and live the life that you feel like God's calling you to live, so that when you're creating music, you're creating out of a source of fullness and not out of an obligation or a job, which it is to a lot of people. It's a job. They go write a song like it's a job, and
it's sort of this self-perpetuating machine that, like, if you want to play this spot in a night, you've got to have this amount of production and this amount of people on stage and that costs a certain amount of money, and so you're going to have to play a certain amount of dates to sustain the people, to give them the salary. You know what I mean? It just sort of becomes, it gets out of hand real quickly. And we were getting down that road and started making decisions to just, we got to have enough shows for the guys so they don't leave and we're left without a whatever player. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you start realizing you're making decisions out of fear and not what is actually the Lord wanting us to do, or what is actually best for our, our family. And when we sort of switched some of that around and started going, hey, we can't promise you anything. We love you and we love to, work with you. We can promise you this tour or this show or these whatever, and going
kind of went on it like a show by show or tour by
tour
basis.
Hopefully that works for you guys. Yeah.
And God has always just blessed us in that and provided the right people at the right time. It's sort of like just surrendering some of that. And I used to be I wanted to know every detail. I wanted to know every flight difference of the price of this one and how many, water bottles will be in the dress. Like I wanted my hands in everything. I was just very control freak and didn't realize it. And the more and more, and him being manager has been a huge part of that, because I know I can trust him. Not that
I make just as many mistakes, but they're honest mistakes.
Yeah.
I guess,
right.
Honest
I know
mistakes.
he's got
not trying to
our
hose her.
best interest at heart.
I'm not making a decision because of someone else I represent or some other relationship. If I made a mistake, it's because I made a mistake. I can own it, and she knows that. Okay, well, moving forward, you're gonna continue making decisions that benefit me, that you're caring for me, and I think that gives her that freedom.
Well, and he knows me best, and I trust you the most, and so it's like he's gonna pick the flight that makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't need to worry.
He knows
about
my
that.
preferences and what makes most sense financially.
Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah,
again, but
imagine.
it's a little bit more traditional roles of like, hey, babe, you make the decisions. I'll make the pasta. I'll show up and sing the songs. It works out for me.
So now that you guys have kind of chosen this, for lack of a better word, like kind of chosen what you want it to look like, or what you feel like God was calling you to. Like, so what is that? What does a day look like for you guys?
Just typical at home day.
Regular
what
are you guys doing? Give people some context.
Well, I can give a little bit of an ideal. I don't want to paint the picture that I do this every single day, though. It's multiple times a week that we do this, but we will. Because I technically I work out of an office, but I work from home because I only go there because I can actually get work done than at home with the kids. But I'm not beholden to an office. I'm not beholden to a corporation. So we always have breakfast together, and I'd say that's pretty much 7 days a week.
That's awesome.
We have breakfast together. Then generally I'm taking the two youngers on a Mother's Day out. So I take them to a Mother's Day out. I go to the office. And I get work done there, and it's everything from our personal stuff, handling, paying bills, to planning and advancing shows that are coming up, and planning and strategy with the album stuff that's coming up, scheduling studio sessions, all that stuff, and also kind of future planning, where that gives me the opportunity to kind of dream and plan and schedule stuff out. So, but still getting caught up on all that other stuff, and then. I'll come home.
And I'm homeschooling.
She's home. So during that whole thing, she's homeschooling. Yeah. If there's a morning where I don't have a lot going on, I can try to help her get the homeschool day started, because a lot of the kids' disobedience, it will happen when I'm not there.
Yeah.
And so if I'm there to kind of get the day started and set the tone and catch a couple of those, hey, but that was disrespectful way to speak. Oh, okay, Dad, you're right. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Again, not perfectly, not every time do they just respond and turn like that. Oftentimes, if they're having problems at home, I'll call home, especially our 6-year-old who's really rambunctious right now. I'll call and talk to him on the phone, and a lot of times it's like a light switch, and he'll change.
Yeah.
So again,
very intentional.
As much as I can be home, I'll be home. But then I will come home usually pre-dinner, 3-4 o'clock, maybe do some yard work. Because that's kind of an everyday thing on our property. I'm, full-time landscaper. Then we'll have dinner together, which again, breakfast every day, dinner every day, lunches sometimes, just depending on my schedule. And then this is where I'm making it sound like I do this every day. But again, it's probably 4 or 5 days a week consistently, and striving for 7.
Yeah.
Is we lead family worship time. And so that consists of praying together, reading Psalms. We do some catechism, which is really just distilling down a lot of doctrinal truths, like who is God, who is Jesus, how do they relate, all that kind of stuff, into memorable chunks for the kids. We're going through a book called New City Catechism right now. It breaks it up. It's meant for one a week. We're doing it one a time, one every day, so that we can get through it in, I guess it'd be about a month and a half. And then we can move on to some other different catechisms. And instead of like staying on it till we memorize it,
Sure.
we just want to expose all the different,
Get
the idea.
because they'll learn words like sanctification and
Sure.
justification, and they'll learn what are the 10 Commandments, all 10 of them instead of just, in general. So that's a fun part of it. And we sing songs together. And we even break down some of our scripture. We read a call to worship scripture. We read a benediction scripture. We sing a new hymn. Not necessarily new, but a hymn of that day. Then we go back and sing a hymn that we had just done previously to keep it
kind of get it fresh in memory. Yeah.
And that's kind of, basically goes from that to putting kids to bed. And I mean, that's a day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Why did you guys decide to homeschool? Let's just talk about that.
Yeah, I can answer. I was homeschooled for most of growing up and loved it. And, as a little girl, was like, I want to be a teacher and 20 other things, but I always wanted to homeschool my kids. And when we first started out on the road, our kids were babies, so they just came with us everywhere. And there got to be a point where it was like, well, yeah, we'll homeschool because that's what most people, on the road do.
Sure.
But I don't even know how we ended up where we were at Montessori. I have no real recollection of
I think
how
it
that
was
happened.
just because our oldest son, really, he struggled with, I think what we learned was a lack of consistency. And so
He needed a routine.
So I think it's fun. You wake up in a different city every day.
Sure.
There's a new landscape. There's one day it's the desert, one day it's mountains, one day it's lush green. And I think that's amazing. We somehow, maybe trial and error, deduced that lack of consistency was kind of making him irregular. So at this point, I was used to play drums with her, and by this time I was managing, and we looked around. I was like, I don't really have to be here. Like
Sure.
we have a whole team around you. There's a road manager. Everybody's there. I don't have to be here. So
technically,
I flew the kids home, and that changed everything. They had a regular routine. They slept in their own bed at night, and I guess we knew early on, and I don't know how we came to that conclusion. We didn't want to put them in public school.
Yeah.
So there was a private, I'd say Christian, it's not Christian, private school right around the corner. It's not a Christian school, but we'd interviewed them and everyone there basically was Christian. So that was kind of that kind of pacified, reassured us a little bit. But it was a really interesting philosophy, the way the school was run, and that worked great, fantastic for them. But she kept,
it was one of those things that was like, this is really good, but I want something different. But how do you just stop doing something good to do another thing that is hopefully good? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Big change. Too.
It was going to take a big leap of faith, and then boom.
COVID happened. Yeah. We were praying about it. I'd been reading books. I'd been blogs. For years, like I went to homeschool conferences and wasn't even a homeschool mom. Like it's hilarious looking back how much I wanted to do it, but also didn't know how I would have the capacity traveling so much, even if they were with me. It was sort of like, how is this ever going to be,
And I was still in the blind at this point, not really aware or
didn't
I wouldn't say I wasn't on board with it, but I didn't
see the value.
I had no real, I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just schooling.
I didn't homeschool. I went to public school. So it just wasn't in my wheelhouse.
And you liked the school they were at too.
Yeah, I loved the school. I thought it was
great.
great. And there was a book. She had me read a book, and it answered all of my questions in a pretty, like, okay, at least I don't have all these crazy questions.
Sure.
And somewhere in the process, light switches flipped in my head, and I went from being like, I don't know, to I'm okay with it, to like, my kids are never going to go to school. Like, never.
Indoctrination camp.
Yeah, never.
Not happening.
Yeah. And that all happened. Again, it was God's timing. In our minds, we were like, you know what? Let's get through this school year.
Yeah, this was
coming up,
2020,
and in the next year, which would have been 2021, we'll start homeschooling that year. But we're going to give them one more year at this Christian school. And God said, no. I finally got my foot in the door. I got you to admit that you were going to obey me, but I'm going to make you obey me sooner.
We were like, COVID happened just for us. We joked about at the time.
I feel that way too, personally.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
It's like the Lord is good at that or something.
Yeah. So in a lot of respects, we're still baby homeschoolers, other than the fact that she was homeschooled, and so she's a resource. Her mom's a resource.
Sure.
And we found, tons of resources online, friends, and even just online resources that we don't know.
It's so not as complicated as they've made us believe. It's like, if you think that if you went to public school and you think that you're not qualified to educate your children, you do realize you're sending them to the very place that didn't qualify you to get educated, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like,
It's so true.
Yeah.
wait a second.
Yeah.
You are qualified. You're their parent, you
Right.
know? And I think I didn't really struggle with that as much. I think you were like, well, how do you know we're doing it right? You know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Well, we can read, you know.
well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And there also was someone told me, I think it was Wendy, said like, maybe not. But there's gaps in every education. Every education has gaps. I mean, you look at public school, there's a huge gap missing called the Lord.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But every education has gaps, and as a homeschooler, you kind of get to choose them because you can't cover everything.
Sure.
In, 12 years. I don't know everything.
Right.
I'm still being educated, and that's another beauty of
Yeah,
homeschooling
sure.
is you're getting to sort of
Do it again.
and
Yeah.
learn different things.
Yeah.
And I think I love it more than obviously kids are like, oh, school.
Yeah, I hate
Even when you
school.
try to make it
Well,
beautiful.
it's like you asking my son this morning,
Yeah.
what's your favorite subject? None. I don't like any of
I
them.
know.
It's like, oh, stop.
But then they actually do.
I know.
I mean, when they're in it and they're making those connections, and it's very
But then,
fun.
and the husband's perspective, my perspective with her is she's doing all of that. Like, am I going to ruin them? Are they going to learn it? And I look at it, I'm like, she's doing an unbelievable job. The amount of research, the amount of stuff that she's pulled together, the books, the lists, the daily, it's unbelievable the amount of effort that she puts into it. So
it's fun.
our kids are so blessed.
Well, and
to
I think,
have her.
if as a parent, it's like, who cares more about your children than you?
Totally.
So like, you're going to do whatever you can for them within
Yes.
your own power to make that as good of an experience as possible.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I guess, let's talk about health stuff for a little bit. What are you guys trying to do for your children from like a healthy home perspective? Like, what's been kind of your top priorities?
Yeah,
And it doesn't just have to be like physical health, but just
Sure.
health in general.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Do you have any?
Well, I mean, I touched
catechism
on
and-
on that family worship. I think is huge. Even though I'm still learning how to lead it graciously, because I want my kids to sit still, and they're not sitting still, and I'm
Yeah, what's wrong?
blood vessels.
Sanctifying for
Yeah,
all of
I'm like,
us.
yeah, it's very sanctifying for me.
Oh my
But I
gosh,
do
yeah.
think we're trying to teach them that is normal, it's expected, and it pleases God to worship Him, to stop your day and corporately come together, not just everybody go in their own room, but that there's something about coming together worshiping.
Sure.
So that's that
good.
spiritual side of health for them. If she's in charge of the food, so I'll let her answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very in line with you guys, even if some of it is still trying to get there, But I think our philosophy has always been, we want things to do things as close to how God created, these
Yeah.
things as possible.
Keep
So
it simple.
Yeah.
eating real foods, drinking clean water that's not poisoned. I have
Yeah.
a hair that won't get out of my mouth. Okay. Believing that our babies don't come into the world deficient in, things that they need to be prodded and things, all of that. I'll just stop
Leave
there.
it there. Yeah.
And just really trying to, I remember my mom, she was kind of an OG crunchy mom back
Yeah.
when it wasn't like a thing.
Sure.
I remember eating like carob chip cookies instead of chocolate chip cookies and like soy milk when that was brand new. And
Yeah.
she's like, this has to be better, right? Which now she'd be like, I never fed you soy milk.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yes, you did. I remember. It was gross.
Can't forget that taste.
Yeah. But I remember her talking about, and then giving me a book when we had Eli, called, I'm sure you know about it. Wow. How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor.
Yeah.
And which is an older book.
Yeah.
But very much just like you need to, and again, this leans into the traditional roles thing. Like it's very our culture to go, oh, something's wrong, call the doctor. Oh, this, call the teacher. Oh, call the coach. Oh, call the youth
pass
pastor.
it on to
Like
somebody else.
delegate
Delegate.
to the
Yeah.
professionals.
Right.
The experts, and recognizing that as a mother, I have a duty to learn some basic things in order to like take care of my children and not just, give them a antibiotic every time they get an ear infection, but go, well, why are they having these and how could we prevent them? And is there a way to
Right.
treat them at home? And knowing that sort of, nursing as not a career, but as like a whatever you'd call it, home vocation, like
Sure.
learning how to nurse a sick person is actually an art that we've lost
Yeah.
in our modern world. It's really been something on my heart just in the last year or so of like, I have a responsibility to know how to take care of my kids and their health and
That's
you
good.
know, their every day, but then also, I know that winter's coming and I want to have the elderberry ready and, like get them on,
Yeah.
more regimens and stuff. But yeah, lots of sunshine, lots of bare feet.
Yeah.
Lots of
Just pretty natural living.
living
Yeah.
the life.
Yeah, I mean, I think they tie together well too. You
Sure.
know, you talk about like the kind of home trifecta. We're homemaking, we're home a lot. You're homesteading, we're homeschooling, all that stuff. They're out there in the garden with us, helping us, grow our garden, which is a part of their schooling. It's a part of their just an understanding of where food comes from. It's an understanding of work, and if you don't go out and harvest, then you don't get the result of having that food if you miss the timing. And so the cohesiveness of how all those work together. Going back to what you said, like the concept of trying to keep things as close to how God designed them, and that's not just shipping everyone off to their own thing and sitting in their own different cubicle in their own, but it's being together in and of itself is creating that health of we have an internal community inside our family,
Right.
We have an internal fellowship and internal problem solving, and there is conflict and
Church
conflict
discipline.
resolution, discipline, and so some that I don't even know which category that would fall under, whether it's mental health or spiritual health or whatever. But again, it's the physical health of what they're eating. It's the mental health of learning and knowing the process that gets your food, and all those working together. It's just, that's one of the huge benefits of the way we're doing life right now.
Yeah.
What would you say for parents who are listening and are like, it just feels so overwhelming, like I don't even know where to begin?
Yeah.
What would you encourage them or recommend? Like where should they start?
Just like with health stuff or with any of it?
Just like having a healthy, joyful family. Like how do you kind of get that bowl rolling? How do you get that going?
I would say it starts with you, the parents, and I would look directly at fathers and say it starts with you.
Yeah.
Set the tone of your home. If you're not smiling, your kids aren't going to smile. If you're not laughing and joyful, they're not going to be laughing and joyful. If you're not praising God, they're not going to grow up thinking that you should praise God.
Sure.
If you pass everything off, they're going to think they're supposed to pass everything off. So it starts there. I mean, I tell Franny all the time, it's just the whole fake it till you make it. I know it's so cliche, but you smile even when you don't feel like smiling.
Changes your self.
And it winds up changing you. It helps set the tone for those around you, and then it actually winds up changing your heart too. So the first thing I would say is you have to get in the Word. You have to be at peace with God, and then you have to let that peace flow through you. You have to tap into His source of joy, His source of peace and hope, to be able to kind of outpour that out into your life. But as far as like starting, whether it's homeschooling, it's just, you just have to start.
Well, yeah, I do think, the thing I can most relate it to is like homesteading, which we're very still novices at that. But everyone said, you got to start somewhere. You got to just jump in and make mistakes and you'll figure it out.
Just commit to it.
Yeah. And I feel like that's been a good life lesson for me with kind of everything. If I want to learn to, quilt, I'm going to make some really bad quilts before I make some good ones, just failing forward or whatever they call that.
And you knew that from songwriting already.
For sure.
You know that you're going to write 100 bad songs before you write one you're proud of.
I think it's honestly for me, if I'm speaking to a mom, I would say looking at your duties as a wife and a mom as God-given, like beautiful things to cultivate that you can flourish in. So much of our, again, modern post-Christian culture says that that's like, those are like inferior jobs that you would hire a housekeeper to do, or that's why McDonald's exists, so you don't have to dirty your hands and waste time on those things. And that even when we don't think we think that way, like we don't know the water that we're swimming in. It's so indoctrinated into our culture. It was indoctrinated into our mom's culture. It was indoctrinated into our parents' culture as well. And so it's very like all we've ever known is to sort of just look down on those things. And so they become this like, this like drudgery. Yeah. And when you start to look at it as like, I'm actually this like queen of this castle, this domain that God has given me in my home, whether it's an apartment, and I have this challenge to beautify it and to take care of the people within its walls and to, be responsible and steward the however much God has given me, whatever He's put in my hands, like taking that and making more of it, making it beautiful. To me, it's a mindset shift because it takes something like ironing clothes and makes it fun. And how can I glorify God in this as opposed to just, your
Again.
shirt's wrinkled again? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Right.
it's really a heart posture. And it's been incredible for me. So I think whether that is jumping into homeschooling or taking back, the reins of health and just recognizing that people have done this for thousands
Yes,
of
I
years.
was gonna
This isn't anything new.
Yes, what we're doing is the experiment. Like
Right.
how
It's
we're
so
living
true.
is new.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just like read some old dead people and see how they did life,
Mm-hmm.
like here's my action step: go read the Little House series. Like
Start there.
seriously,
Yeah.
and go, okay. I think I could probably. They had a lot fewer, modern conveniences, and they
Right.
figured it out. I think
Yeah.
I can do this and do it well and do it joyfully, and it's actually a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a learning curve. We're having to
Sure.
relearn what the past 2 or 3 generations in our lives didn't pass down well,
Sure.
or we didn't receive well, or I'm not trying to blame shift, but
No.
but the reality is we didn't grow up knowing the things that our great grandparents just knew inherently,
Right.
how to plant a field, even how to build a house. I mean, there was
Sure.
so much. Everyone did those, and
Sure.
they lived and worked in community a lot better, I think, than we do now. And so you are relearning a little bit, but you're relearning again what people have been doing for thousands of years. That's how I got into. That's how I got through college. I had no idea what it was getting into, but I just said, you know what? I'm not the first person to go to college. I think I'm going to be
I think
okay.
you figured it out.
I think I'm going to be okay.
Out.
Yeah.
Well, and we're reclaiming, Lord willing, some of those skills and some of those mindsets to pass down to our children that
Absolutely.
could change,
Again,
generationally.
part of that inheritance. It's not just physical, like cash in hand money,
Sure.
money in the bank. A lot of it is skills, mindset, even just raising them in the fear and knowledge and instruction of the Lord, that they have that as a basis for how to live their life. So,
Do you feel like having that mentality has like kind of encouraged some form of collectivism within your household, to where it's not just about me and as the individual, but like you're teaching them like, hey, this is a family unit, like a family creed of kind of like what we're doing together. Like, do you guys talk about that, or is that kind of part of that catechism process, or is it just kind of happening without maybe paying that much attention to
I
it?
think to some degree.
some of it happens naturally. I mean, we stress that a lot, that, hey guys, let's get the house clean and we're going to go to, the bowling alley today. We're going to have fun. And then there's a big meltdown. There's something that happens, and it may have only involved one or a couple of the kids. And it's like, hey guys, we can't go now.
Yeah.
Wait, but I didn't. Yeah, but I can't leave the 2-year-old at home or
Sure.
the 4-year-old at home by
We're a
themselves
family.
while we go.
Yeah.
Like the truth is, sometimes our actions or other people's actions affect those around them. So someone else's actions affect me. Your actions affect others. And
Yeah.
so there's some of that just kind of natural learning, that part of being a big family. There are times where our older kids they find out we were pregnant with another, and they're just like, no, that means so much more work for me. And we're like, but it's so much more blessing. Like now
Yeah.
that my oldest son
now
realizes
he's like, can we have 3 more?
he's got, they're his best friends.
They're not bunnies.
Yeah, and now that he knows the relationship, the richness
Yeah,
of
the
what they
benefit.
bring, the joy and blessing they are.
I will say, I think having a larger family, there is just some of that's so natural. It's like
Sure.
and I look at my kids and I go, they are starting off at such a better place than I never changed a diaper, but when I had my first baby,
Yeah.
and there's just a confidence that they will have going into motherhood and fatherhood.
absolutely.
That is a gift that they may not recognize until years down the road. But we're playing the long game, and so I think too, something you said about the bowling alley made me think of something, but I can't remember it now. But it's just some of it just comes naturally with having a larger family, knowing that you have to be there for each other.
Do you think just like being in those more traditional roles that God intended you to be in has just kind of unlocked these like abilities or perspectives that you're like, I didn't even know I had that, and now here it is, kind of thing?
A little bit for me, yeah. I don't know if you feel that way, but
I mean, I feel like it highlights my weaknesses.
well, that too.
Yeah,
that
most of the
too.
time, yeah.
It's like,
Very
I have a
sanctified,
lot
yeah.
of growing to do.
Yeah.
I remember what I was going to say. Hospitality. Hospitality is also a really, it's a part of our lives, and it's something that we've focused on. And we have seasons. We just had a baby. We didn't have as many people over.
Sure.
When I was sick and pregnant, but I think that's another way that I've seen my kids just naturally learn to pitch in. Not all of them. The older ones for sure are more better practiced at this, but it's like people are coming over. All right, guys, let's get the house
Gear it
ready.
up.
They
Yeah.
love the feeling of the music's playing,
Just
the
the ambiance
the
and
candles
environment.
on. There's like the house is clean, mom's cooking something, and our
Yeah,
friends
it
are
just
coming.
feels
Like,
special.
they love that, and they're like, when are we having people over?
Yeah.
And so giving them that sort of something to rally around too, and it's usually for most people a pretty natural thing to have people over, and if
Yeah.
it isn't, it should be. So
Right.
invite some people over and read Little House on the Prairie. Those are my tips.
Those are great steps.
So in terms of, so that's kind of like the health of, I mean, the whole family. But what about, how do you guys fill up your cups so that you can keep pouring it out on your kids and each other?
I mean, again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse going back to this,
No, that's
but
all right.
again, maintaining my relationship with Christ reinforces what my relationship to my wife is supposed to be, the importance of it, and the fuel for it. So that is definitely there, and I'm never doing enough either in my relationship with Christ or my relationship with my wife, but it constantly, that's my kind of rallying point, my center to come back to if I start to stray in either direction, I realize, okay, I owe it to Christ to love my wife the way he loved me. And so I think that is maybe more important, not just to be the Sunday school answer, but I think that's more important than we give it credit for.
Sure. It's a foundation.
Yeah. And from practically speaking, before I let you jump in, we work together, so we're around each other all the time, especially when we're on the road, which we're at home most of the time. But it's always family, it's always business, our conversations. It's very rarely just a chance for us to be ourselves. So as our children have gotten old enough, we now have two teenagers. Well, the daughter's almost a teenager, but a 12-year-old girl is about as mature as a 16-year-old boy.
That's so true.
So we have two teenagers
Yeah.
that can watch our kids when we go into, we're talking, oftentimes our dates, we're home by 6:30 because we go out for a 5:00 dinner, maybe pick up groceries on the way home,
Put the kids to
and
bed.
we're home by 6:30.
Yeah.
So we're not even gone out late, but we've been able to do that consistently. And, people they've said that date your wife, don't ever stop dating your wife. And a lot of that, I think people have a different, our idea of date is not, okay, let's get dressed up and go see a movie. Now we do those when it's appropriate.
Sure.
But it literally is just, hey, do you want to go have dinner tonight? Yes, let's go. Let's, okay,
Just
kids are happy. So we just go and just sit across from each other and breathe. And of course, we generally have a 3-month-old in tow with us right now on our dates. But that's been fantastic for me, because otherwise you do fall into that. We're just roommates. We're coworkers. We're passing each other.
There's so much to managing a family and a household. And it's like, you can forget that you started off as two people in love, and you still are, but it's just like so much to do.
It feels like that. I can't name the movie, but it feels like that scene in a movie where you're inside this party and everything's just loud, and you go outside and shut the door and it just gets quiet. And that's what us, being able to go out on a dinner is. And then you go outside, you take your breath, and as far as the movie playing out, and you go right back into that noise again, and you're like, but now you can have a smile on your face because you've had that moment to yourself.
Exhale.
We can then come back home, start our bedtimes that last until we're barely we're so exhausted, we're falling asleep putting our kids to bed. So it's like, if we don't have that little break there, we won't have any time. So again, that's one practical thing, and I think a million people have said never stop dating your wife, but we do that not as like this got to impress each other or extravagant out. It's just literally just
some quiet time,
just having some quiet time alone. That's been huge. What about you?
Yeah, well, I immediately thought for you, F3, like having men that you work out with and have sort of like that men's only space.
Can't you tell?
You look great.
I'm getting back. I'm getting back. I was not as active.
Gained some baby weight.
Yes.
I will accept.
That's security right there.
The paternal baby weight.
That's right.
But yeah, no, that's been huge for me. I have a huge male community fellowship of guys. It's a nationwide thing that do free of charge, always outdoors, just men working out together. And that's given me, because I'm around other men and we're constantly challenging each other, pushing each other. And it's not a Christian organization, in and of itself, but the vast majority in our region are Christians. So it's basically feels like a workout, small group, like Bible study workout. Cool. And so, that's been fantastic for me, because I guess it checked the box I didn't even know I was missing as far as having some of that iron sharpening iron male relationships.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's a bunch of different types of men, but a lot of men are like me, and that we're kind of like lone wolf. Like, I'm fine. I'll be fine. Just let me have a little bit of peace and quiet at home, and I'm good to go. But it reinvigorates me because I hear other men talking about, this is happening at home, or this is happening, or this is a praise, or they talk about their kids and struggles or successes, and it reminds me just how much is involved in raising my family, and it just encourages me and spurs me on. So
it's good discipleship both
Mm-hmm.
ways. I think, and for me too, one thing is just not neglecting, truth, goodness, and beauty, like reading good things for me, not just, obviously reading the Word of God is so important, but for so many years I was so practical. It was like, well, if I'm not learning something about, only reading like nonfiction, or only reading, I don't know, I can't even think of a good example, but like recognizing how important it is to nourish our souls. Like, it sounds kind of woo-woo, but just reading good books, looking at good art, listening to good music, like that sort of stuff. That I remember being asked that by Hal Andrews' wife, Nita, like, well, how are you like feeding, as an artist? And I'm like, I don't know. I have to like go write a song, and then I perform it, and then I have to tour. And
just
like,
do it. Yeah.
How are you like, and I'm finally at almost 40 starting to see like, oh yeah, you have to like put the beautiful things in to be able to have, stuff to give back out.
Sure.
And so much of story and literature and art and music for so much of history was Godward, and now so much of it isn't. And so most of what I like to read and listen to is old, but but I do think there's we're so materialistic in our culture now that we don't think about those things as valuable.
Sure.
It's like, well, time is money, efficiency. And it's like, well, sit down with a book and a cup of tea and see what happens in your spirit and your soul, and how God can use that, even if it's just pouring into your kids or your spouse. So
how do you find time to actually do that? Like, have you kind of set up a structure to where it's like, hey, you can go in with F3 in the morning, and then 2:00 I'm going to have my quiet time. Like, do you guys have a structure like that, or is it kind of random, or how does that work?
With F3, with the workout situation, it's pretty easy because I'm usually gone and home before anyone else in the house wakes up. So that's
like 5:30,
and that's kind of how it's structured.
By design.
The idea is that you're not taking away time from the family in order to come out here and work out, but the whole thought process behind it is that you're becoming a better leader for your family, for your community, a better husband, better father, better leader in the community is kind of like the rallying cry, at least the way we do it. And so that's a big part, is that is not really taking time away. It is indirectly because you're a little bit more, maybe you're more tired, you're ready to go to bed at 9, and the kids aren't ready until later. And so that takes it to, but at some point I just got used to it. I have a standing alarm at 4:30. That's when I wake up, whether I'm working out or not. And so I've just gotten used to it. So that's how I find that time.
I do not get up at 4:30.
Unless you're feeding a baby or something, changing
that's
a diaper.
True. Sometimes I am. Most of the time for me, it'll be at night, or during the day. I can like put on an audiobook or a podcast when I'm, in the kitchen a lot or whatever. During the school year, there's less time for me just because I have so many children, so many students that I'm trying to make sure they get everything done. It does feel like the day is like, how is it already 2:00? We're just barely. But it also, I think we overcomplicate, like, well, I have to make sure the kids I have to entertain them. I couldn't possibly just sit down with them. I'm getting better at this. But I find if I try to like go off and hide from them, they will always find me. But if I were to just sit down in the living room where the chaos is happening and just like open a book,
doing it,
they will probably ignore me. You know what I mean? Like they just want to know I'm nearby.
Yeah.
So I think not having this ideal of it has to look a certain way or whatever. If I really have to like think or get work done, I'll like go somewhere, or I'll wait till nighttime and.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're pitching in a lot with bedtimes now, but that's another time where I'll jump from. She's always with whoever the youngest is, and I'll jump. Right now we've got our 2-year-old, so I'll do 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old, and everyone else can put themselves to bed. But oftentimes my oldest son puts our 4-year-old to bed. Our 6-year-old is kind of on the verge of putting himself to bed. But that's another time. That's another area where she can. She's not necessarily by herself, but she can give the baby a bath, or she can focus on that while I'm getting 2 or 3 of those kids to bed.
Or try to spend time with the older ones, because that's an interesting season when you still have babies, but then you have teenagers who want to stay up late and like talk about
to you,
the world.
Yeah,
And
sure.
you're
Right.
like,
Answer all their questions.
I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's do this. This is great.
But knowing that it won't, I mean, I just have enough moments every week. I feel like there will be a moment where something will happen, or I'll be all by myself in the house for 30 seconds, and I'll go, this is as quiet as it's going to be every day at some point. Like at some point it will be this quiet.
Yeah, Carly
every
says it
day.
all the time.
And I'm like, I
No
gotta
more
live.
dirty
this
little
is it.
fingerprints on the glass.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so
Yes.
true.
I gotta
One thing
live
that
it up.
that's kind of gone unsaid. So we are not by any means, we're not a device-free house.
Sure.
And I'll say yet, because I do think that we're slowly inching our way, at least towards what we feel like is the best possible compromise towards that. So that's one of the ways that we find the time is our kids, they don't get just unlimited time. They don't, none of them have their own device. Our son has a phone. It's a, I guess you would call it a smartphone, but it's like one of those ones that's,
dumb
it's like a dumb smartphone. It's not connected to the internet at all. All he can do is phone call and text us, and any of the apps that we allow, like music and Canon Plus. He loves it because he listens to those books. Audible, like he listens to his books. But not having that distracted, I don't know. It almost feels like you would have more peace and quiet if you just said, okay, everybody go get on a device. But there's something about not being on it, and we both fall away from that.
Sure.
We both get on our phones more than we should, but when we're focusing on it and when we're intentional about putting our phones down, we find that we have a lot more time than we realize, because I get the most in my flesh, and I feel like I could say the same for you. We both get in our flesh the most when we're on our device and get interrupted.
Absolutely.
And that is like, I'm flaring up. So how do we bring more peace? It's almost like you're inventing time in the day, because I just don't do that unless I'm in a setting where I mean, some of it is work related, and so I do that when I'm at work and try not to do it when I'm home. Not perfect by any means, but working towards less and less things that we thought, because we introduced devices early with no intention
with our
of
first kid.
like no filters, but no like only this. It was just like, here's an iPad.
This is what everybody does.
Yeah,
right.
They're allowed at dinner. Here, have my phone. Like, it was just every device we could give them. Making it sound worse than it is, but we weren't trying to curtail that at all. But then we started to, and so because we feel like we kind of went too far, like our son's playing video games and doing things that it's like, man, I wish we'd never bought that PS4. I wish we'd never bought the whatever.
Not that they were bad, but just it was like, there's so much
it's just a
better use
fight
of time.
to say no.
Sure.
But we have been able to rail some of those things back, and we take the PS4 away, and it's not there, and so
it's amazing when you just say no.
When
like,
you
go outside,
when you realize you're the parent and you can just say no.
Yeah.
And so I mean, again, to kind of come back to what we were saying, so one of the ways we save times is by avoiding all of those fights that we used to have over, hey, it's time to turn off the device. I don't want to. And then there's this huge meltdown. Now, if that's not as prevalent, then, hey, guys, let's go outside for a walk. It's like everyone's like, okay.
Yeah,
I'm either going to build with this toy on the ground, or my brother and I were playing this card game over here, or I'm going to go out on a walk. It's not this like, you can't pull me away from this device.
Sure.
Devices are really a time stealer.
Oh, yeah.
At least that's how it was in our house.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I feel like your guys' journey you're on, your trajectory seems very encouraging. And I think it's one of those things that people, like you were saying, people just need to know that it's possible. Like, people need to know that this is not abnormal. Like, this is something that historically is normal.
Totally.
And I think much like anything else, if we don't have enough outspokenness about who God is and his plan for us, and then just happen or help people to implement it more consistently. I think people will only start to try to implement if they know that it's even possible. And I think there's just not enough positive stories about this kind of stuff. Like, I think people used to kind of look down on it. I think because I grew up homeschooled, and it was always kind of like the kind of shameful thing. And I think the culture has shifted, and for good reason. And I just hope that, I hope that parents that are listening don't believe the lie that like it's not worth it, or you can't do it, or it's going to be too costly. You both have to work a job, you know, because like when Carly and I started having kids, like we went from income because she was nannying for you, and that was a huge blessing for us because I was in school and we were getting through, but then we shifted to just one income and started having kids, and it was, you know, in Colorado it's expensive, but the thing that we realized is just that like God is provisional, like he'll provide, and I think there's blessing in obedience. And I think for a lot of people there, a lot of the tension is coming from this posture of just being like, I don't think this is what we're supposed to be doing as a family. And it's like, well, we'll send them off to daycare and that costs money, and we'll buy a lot of convenience foods, and those aren't cheap. And, you know, we'll be doing sports all the time and never at home together. And just all these things that just like, it happens so easily because it's just all so entertainment based, so convenience based. So just like, this is what true identity is as a female, is to go out and to conquer and do all these things in the business world. And like, I'm just like, I don't know, like maybe at some points in your life, but I think there's nothing like, there's such beauty in a traditional family. And I think our culture and our world is really experiencing the side effects from not instilling those principles on a daily basis.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
We could do a whole...
That's like a whole episode
about feminism. What?
Yeah.
Truly though, I mean, truly the trying to, you know, outsmart God's design and think we can do this. We can do this better has cost us our culture. It has pretty much. So
I'll always point it back to the abdication of fathers from their duties.
Absolutely.
I think it starts there. Fathers, you know, if they weren't abdicating from their duty, if they were properly loving, serving, and training in their home, you know, we'd be in a completely different place right now.
And one thing I always tell fathers is like, I think that role in health is one of those where, well, like you handle this health stuff, and then when the wife is like, well, this is what this food costs, it's like, well, you know, we don't have that in the budget, too expensive. But like part of that responsibility is like providing a healthy budget for healthy things, you know, and I've had so many clients that they found that it was actually cheaper to cook at home and not go out to eat and have less doctor bills and, you know, whatever. And I think as husbands, I always try to encourage them, like, like you have to be the head. And if you don't have much knowledge now, just like you were saying, like you had to learn some things. It's like, well, that's worth the time. And maybe you have to sacrifice playing golf with your buddies or hunting or whatever, or just, you know, thinking that you can't do it, but you can. Like the time that you spend on your phone looking at silly things and just like applying that to learning something about a skill or whatever, or understanding your children or understanding health or your wife or like there's just so many things that we could do to get that time back that I think we just fall victim to it. But I think it's totally reasonable. Carly and I did it even when we didn't have hardly anything, and I think it was just truly because God's like, like this is, keep going, like I got you, like, and we were always able to make it, and it was great. But
blessed your efforts.
So anything else that you guys would like to comment on or say? I know you said you mentioned an album coming up, so share any details on that?
I don't have many.
Okay.
We don't have a time, like,
you're working on it,
but it'll be 2025. I think I can say that confidently.
Cool.
Yes,
that sounds
It's been a long time coming. But I'm excited about it. It's going to be pretty different from my last album, but I think still enough Franny that people will be excited about it.
Cool.
It's all more worshipful.
Awesome.
But yeah, we're excited about that.
I'm really looking forward to it. Knowing a little bit what your journey's been like. I'm looking forward to this rendition of Franny. So
it feels very intentional to me. We could have made an album at any point during this process that just to do it.
Sure.
I mean, even from a business standpoint, just to fulfill a contract and move on, because you know, record contracts that's a whole, you know,
I can't imagine.
It's a whole other conversation. But that just never. And that's credit to her. She was like, no, I'm not just going to put my name on something just to, like, I want to do it. It has to mean something. And the transformation that we've had in our personal life, you know, spiritually, as parents, as husband and wife over the past 5 years has led to this album being very intentional and very much more rooted in who she is as a person right now versus just what sounds good on the radio. And I'm not knocking her processes in the past, but it's intentional is just the best word I can come up with.
For sure. I mean, I literally have no idea what radio's looking for right now, and I'm so glad because I'm just making this album, and if you have a single, great, and if not, whatever. I want obviously people to hear it.
Sure.
But I've spent too much time in the past like worrying about what if it doesn't get heard by and it's just like it's up to the Lord. Competent people can't make it happen. Incompetent people can't stop it from happening. And just trusting that he has a plan for it. The people who need it will hear it. And so there's very freeing as well. Just knowing, here it is.
This is me.
So one day soon,
Soonish.
we'll let you know.
Cool.
Yes.
We'll be on the lookout for
We'll
it.
send you guys a copy.
Well, thanks for coming to the mini ranch or farm or whatever we
Love
call
it.
this, and glad it worked
So
out.
fun.
And
I know.
beautiful.
What a
we'll
blessing.
have to do it again
Thanks for
sometime.
feeding
But
us.
yeah, thanks for sharing your guys' insight.
Absolutely.
I definitely felt like I was getting an educational lesson on
my God.
many things, so it was super helpful for me.
I mean, as tried as it sounds, man, goodness, if we can do it, like if that can help encourage somebody, if we can do it, my goodness,
100.
it's not rocket surgery,
Nice.
It's
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, I'll be sure to tag like your social links and all that stuff.
Cool.
But otherwise, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Austin.
All right.